Long before Sweden had its own coins, the people of this land, known to us as Vikings, used a different kind of money. This was not a system of neat round coins with the faces of kings. Instead, it was based on the real value of precious metals, mainly silver. Vikings were great traders and raiders. They traveled far and wide from the rivers of Russia to the markets of the Middle East. From these journeys they brought back vast quantities of silver. This silver came in many forms. It could be beautiful jewelry, ornate goblets, or foreign coins from distant empires like the Abbasid Caliphate or the Byzantine Empire. This silver was not used like modern money. A single silver coin from Baghdad had no set value in a Swedish marketplace. Instead, its worth was based purely on its weight and purity. To make payments, the Vikings used a system we now call hack silver. They would take a piece of silver, be it a bracelet, a ring, or a large foreign coin, and chop it into smaller pieces with an axe or a knife. These pieces were then weighed on small, portable scales. A merchant would state a price and a certain weight of silver, and the buyer would produce a collection of these silver fragments until the scales balanced at the correct amount. This was a very practical system for its time. The hoards of silver found buried across Sweden tell us a great deal about this period. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of these hoards, often containing kilograms of silver. These collections are like a snapshot of Viking Age wealth and trade connections. They contain Arabic dirhams, Anglo-Saxon pennies, and German pfennigs all mixed together with chopped-up local jewelry. This shows that the Viking world was incredibly interconnected. The silver was a global currency, valued everywhere for its intrinsic worth. It did not matter whose face was on the coin. What mattered was how much pure silver it contained. This reliance on weight was the foundation of the economy for centuries. This system, while effective, had its limitations. It was cumbersome to weigh out silver for every single transaction. It also required a great deal of trust between the buyer and seller regarding the purity of the metal. The need for a more standardized and convenient form of currency was slowly growing. The idea of having small, pre-weighed units of value, guaranteed by a local ruler, was beginning to take hold in Scandinavia. The foreign coins that flowed into the region provided a clear example of how such a system could work. The stage was being set for Sweden to take a monumental step, the minting of its very own coins, a symbol of a new era of royal power and economic organization. The transition from weighing silver to using standardized coins marked a major turning point in Swedish history. This significant development is credited to King Olof Skötkonung, who ruled from approximately 995 to 1022. He is considered the first king to rule over both the Svir in the Mälaren Valley and the Gotar in Västergötland, making him a unifying figure. It was under his authority that the very first Swedish coins were struck around the year 995. These coins were minted in the town of Sigtuna, which was a bustling and important trading center at the time. This was a clear statement of royal power and control over the economy. The design of Olof's coins was heavily influenced by the English pennies of the same period, particularly those of King Ethelred the Unready. This was no coincidence. English pennies were a common and trusted currency throughout Northern Europe, brought to Scandinavia both through trade and through the Danegeld, large payments made by the English to Viking armies. The Swedish moneyers, who were often recruited from England, copied the style and weight standard of these English coins. Olof's pennies typically featured a portrait of the king on one side and a cross on the other. The inscriptions were often in Latin, naming the king and the mint town, such as Olaf Rex and Sigtun, meaning King Olaf at Sigtuna. The introduction of these coins was a slow process. They did not immediately replace the use of hack silver. For a long time, the new Swedish pennies circulated alongside foreign coins and fragments of silver bullion. People would often treat the new coins just like any other piece of silver, valuing them by their weight rather than their face value. Hoards from this period show Olof's pennies mixed in with German and English coins, sometimes even bent or clipped, which suggests they were tested for their silver content. The idea of a coin's value being guaranteed by the king's authority, rather than its material worth, took a long time to become fully accepted by the general population. Despite the slow start, the minting of coins in Sigtuna was a profoundly important step. It represented the beginning of a centralized monetary system under royal control. A king who could issue his own currency was a king with real power. It allowed for easier collection of taxes and fines, and it helped to promote a more unified economic identity within the emerging Swedish kingdom. Although coin production in Sweden would be irregular for the next century and a half, Olof Skötkonung had laid the foundation. He had planted the seed of a national currency that would grow and evolve over the next 1,000 years, reflecting the changing fortunes of the Swedish state. The centuries following Olof Skötkonung's first minting were a period of monetary confusion in Sweden. Coin production was sporadic and inconsistent. After the initial minting in Sigtuna, the practice nearly died out for over 150 years. During this time, the Swedish economy once again became heavily reliant on foreign coins, particularly German pfennigs, which flooded into the region through trade with the Hanseatic League. This powerful trading confederation dominated commerce in the Baltic Sea, and its currency became the de facto standard. Swedish merchants and common folk alike used these foreign coins for their daily transactions, reverting to the old habit of valuing them primarily for their silver content. It was not until the mid-12th century that Swedish kings began to mint coins again with any regularity. Kings like Sverker I and Knut Eriksson issued their own pennies, but the quality and supply were often unreliable. A significant problem during the medieval period was the practice of coin debasement. Rulers who were short on funds would often melt down old, pure silver coins and reissue them with less silver and more base metal like copper. This allowed them to produce more coins from the same amount of silver, but it destroyed public trust in the currency. People became suspicious of coins and would often clip small pieces from the edges to test the metal, further reducing their weight and value. To deal with this confusing mix of good and bad coins, a complex system of accounting developed. People did not count in the number of coins, but in a unit of account called the mark. A mark was originally a unit of weight, equal to about 210 grams of silver. All debts, prices, and taxes were calculated in marks. The actual payment could then be made in any combination of coins available, whether they were Swedish pennies, German pfennigs, or English sterlings. The value of each type of coin in relation to the mark would fluctuate based on its current silver content. For example, it might take 192 good silver pennies to equal 1 mark, but 300 debased pennies to equal the same amount. This system highlights the dual nature of money in the Middle Ages. On one hand, there was the abstract unit of account, the mark, which provided a stable measure of value. On the other hand, there was the physical means of payment, the coins themselves, which were often unstable and untrustworthy. This complicated arrangement made commerce difficult, and required merchants to be experts in metallurgy and currency exchange. The lack of a single, reliable national currency was a major obstacle to economic development, and a clear sign of the decentralized and often chaotic nature of the medieval Swedish state. The stage was set for a powerful ruler to finally bring order to this monetary mess. The arrival of Gustav Vasa on the Swedish throne in 1523 marked the beginning of the modern Swedish state, and his impact on the nation's currency was just as profound. When he came to power, the Swedish economy was in shambles after the War of Liberation against Denmark. The country was heavily in debt to foreign powers, particularly the German city of Lübeck. The currency system was still a chaotic mix of debased local coins and various foreign currencies. Gustav Vasa recognized that to build a strong, independent nation, he needed to control its finances. A key part of his strategy was a complete reorganization of the Swedish monetary system. One of his first and most important actions was to establish a new, reliable silver coin in 1534. This coin was called the daler, and its design and weight were based on the large German thaler, a trusted and respected coin throughout Europe. The Swedish daler was a substantial coin, containing a high percentage of silver, which immediately gave it credibility both at home and abroad. On the front, it featured a realistic portrait of the king himself, a powerful symbol of royal authority. On the back was the Swedish coat of arms. This was more than just money, it was propaganda, projecting the image of a stable and powerful new dynasty. Alongside the large dollar, Gustav Vasa's reforms also standardized the smaller denominations. The entire system was organized around the old unit of account, the mark. The new system was set up so that 1 daler was worth 3 marks, and 1 mark was worth 8 ore. Each ore, in turn, was further divided into smaller coins called ortugar and penningar. For the first time, Sweden had a coherent and interconnected system of currency, from the large silver daler down to the small copper pennies. This made accounting, trade, and tax collection far simpler and more efficient, strengthening the power of the central government. Gustav Vasa's currency reform was a crucial element in his consolidation of power and the creation of a modern nation-state. By seizing control of the mints and issuing a reliable and standardized currency, he wrested economic influence away from the Hanseatic League and the Catholic Church. He established a monetary foundation that would serve Sweden for centuries to come. The daler, in its various forms, would remain a central part of the Swedish currency landscape until the late 19th century. Gustav Vasa did not just liberate Sweden politically, he also gave it the tools for economic independence and stability, starting with the silver in its pockets. By the 17th century, Sweden had risen to become a major European power, a period known as the Swedish Empire. This expansion was fueled by military might, but it was also, well, incredibly expensive. The country faced a severe shortage of silver, which was needed to pay for its large armies and administrative costs. However, Sweden had an abundance of another metal, copper. The Great Copper Mountain in Falun was one of the world's most important sources of copper, producing a huge portion of Europe's total supply. The Swedish government, in a moment of brilliant and honestly slightly desperate innovation, decided to base its currency on this plentiful resource. This led to the creation of one of the most remarkable and unusual forms of money in world history, Swedish plate money, or platmynt. Because copper was worth so much less than silver, a coin with the same value had to be much, much larger and heavier. Instead of making impossibly large round coins, the government decided to produce large flat plates of copper. Each plate was stamped in the corners with the mark of the crown, the date, and its value in silver daler. These were not small, pocket-sized items. They were huge, heavy slabs of metal. The largest and most famous of these was the 10-daler plate, which weighed an astonishing 19.7 kilograms, about 44 pounds. Carrying this kind of money around was, obviously, pretty impractical. A simple trip to the market could require a horse and cart, if the purchase was large enough. People would often leave their heavy plate money with a trusted merchant or official and receive a written receipt for it. These receipts could then be traded as a form of payment, representing the value of the copper plate stored elsewhere. This practical necessity inadvertently paved the way for a revolutionary new idea in Swedish finance. The plate money system was unwieldy, but it solved Sweden's silver shortage and allowed the government to finance its imperial ambitions using the nation's natural resources. The era of copper plate money lasted for over a century, from 1644 to 1776. It was a unique solution to a specific economic problem and stands as a testament to Swedish ingenuity. While today it seems like a bizarre and cumbersome form of currency, it was effective in its time. It kept the economy functioning during a period of silver scarcity and demonstrated that money's value could be tied to a government guarantee, even if the physical form was, well, incredibly inconvenient. The sheer weight and size of the platmynt make it one of the most fascinating chapters in the history of money, a time when a person's wealth could literally be measured by the ton. The immense weight and inconvenience of the Swedish copper plate money created a unique problem that, well, demanded an equally unique solution. As I mentioned earlier, people began leaving their heavy copper plates in storage and instead started trading the paper receipts. This practice actually gave an ambitious financier named Johan Palmstruck a rather clever idea. In 1661, he founded the Stockholm Banco, which became Sweden's first private bank. The bank accepted deposits of those cumbersome copper plates and in return issued what were called credit notes or kreditivsedlar. These were, in essence, bank receipts that could be exchanged for the copper money on demand at the bank. These notes really were a revolutionary invention. They were the first true banknotes to be used anywhere in Europe. Unlike the simple handwritten receipts that had been used before, these were printed notes of standardized denominations. People found them far more convenient to carry and use than the heavy copper plates they represented. It didn't take long for everyone to realize that it was much easier to trade these pieces of paper than to haul around kilograms of metal. The notes quickly gained widespread acceptance as payment, circulating as a brand new form of currency. Stockholm Banco had, almost by accident, created a system of paper money that was backed by the value of the copper held in its vaults. However, the bank's success soon led to its downfall. The temptation to issue more notes than the copper it held in reserve proved just a bit too great. The bank began lending out these notes with enthusiasm, creating more money than it could actually back up. When the public realized that the bank was over-issuing notes, panic set in. People rushed to the bank to exchange their paper notes for the real copper plates they were promised. Of course, the bank simply did not have enough copper to cover all the notes it had printed. In 1668, Stockholm Banco collapsed, and Johann Palmstruch was sentenced to death for mismanagement, though his sentence was later commuted. Despite the failure of Stockholm Banco, the idea of paper money had truly taken root. The Swedish Parliament, or Riksdag, recognized the immense potential of this innovation. In the wake of the bank's collapse, they decided to create a new institution, but this time under state control. So, in 1668, they founded Riksstanders Bank, which means the Bank of the Estates of the Realm. This institution, which we now know as Sveriges Riksbank, is the world's oldest central bank. It took over the responsibility of issuing banknotes, carefully learning from Palmstruch's mistakes. This marked the official beginning of state-guaranteed paper money in Sweden, a system that would shape the future of finance not just here, but all around the globe. The 18th century in Sweden was, honestly, a period of significant political and economic turmoil, and the currency system really reflected this instability. Following the Great Northern War, the country was financially exhausted. The monetary landscape was a confusing mess of different standards. There was the silver daler, or daler silver mint, and the copper daler called daler coppermint, and the exchange rate between them was constantly fluctuating. Furthermore, the banknotes issued by the Riksstanders Bank were also trading at a different value from the coins they were supposed to represent. This created three parallel accounting systems, making trade and finance incredibly complicated and, honestly, pretty unpredictable. This chaotic situation was a major drag on the economy. Merchants had to be currency speculators just to conduct business, and public trust in the monetary system was quite low. Several attempts were made throughout the century to fix the problem, but, well, none were really successful. The period is often referred to as the Age of Liberty, but for the economy, it was more of an age of monetary anarchy. The need for a comprehensive reform that would unify the currency and restore stability was obvious to everyone. This task would eventually be taken up by King Gustav III, who came to the throne in 1771, and was determined to impose order on the kingdom. In 1777, Gustav III enacted a sweeping monetary reform that finally brought clarity to the system. The reform established a single, silver-based standard for the entire kingdom. The new main unit of currency was to be the riksdaler. All other forms of money, the copper daler, the old silver daler, and the various banknotes, were to be redeemed and replaced by this new standardized coin. The reform set a fixed relationship between the riksdaler and its smaller denominations. One riksdaler was equal to 48 skilling, and each skilling was worth 12 runstycken. This created a clear and logical structure that was easy for everyone to understand. The 1777 reform was a landmark achievement. It ended more than a century of monetary confusion and laid the groundwork for a modern, stable financial system. By tying the currency firmly to a silver standard and eliminating the competing units of account, Gustav III restored faith in Swedish money. The riksdaler would serve as the foundation of the Swedish currency system for the next 100 years. This act of imposing order on the nation's finances was a key part of Gustav III's broader project of strengthening the monarchy and modernizing the Swedish state, showing once again that control over currency is fundamental to political power. The 19th century was a time of great change across Europe, really driven by industrialization and a strong desire for modernization. Sweden was certainly no exception. The currency system based on the silver riksdaler, which had served the country well since 1777, was beginning to look outdated. Many countries were moving towards a decimal system which was far simpler for calculations and commerce. The old system, where a riksdaler was divided into 48 skilling, was pretty cumbersome. In 1855, Sweden took its first major step towards modernization by introducing a decimal system. The riksdaler was now divided into 100 ore, making financial calculations much more straightforward. This was an important reform, but an even bigger change was just over the horizon. In the 1870s, a movement was growing across Scandinavia to create a monetary union. Denmark and Sweden, longtime rivals, saw the economic benefits of aligning their currencies. In 1873, they formed the Scandinavian Monetary Union, which Norway joined 2 years later in 1875. The union was based on a gold standard, which was becoming the international norm, replacing the older silver standard. As part of this agreement, all three countries agreed to adopt a new currency unit with the same name and the same value in gold, the krona in Sweden and Norway, or krone in Denmark, which simply means crown. On January 1, 1873, the krona officially replaced the riksdaler as the currency of Sweden. The exchange rate was set at 1 riksdaler for 1 krona. The new krona was divided into 100 ore, preserving the decimal system that had been introduced earlier. 1 kilogram of pure gold was set to be worth 2,480 kroner. For the first time, a Swedish krona had the exact same value as a Danish krone or a Norwegian krone. The coins and banknotes of each country were considered legal tender in all three nations. You could travel from Sweden to Denmark to Norway and use your money freely without needing to exchange it. The Scandinavian monetary union was a remarkable example of international cooperation. It greatly simplified trade and travel between the three Nordic countries and helped foster a sense of shared identity and economic integration. The union functioned effectively for over 4 decades. The shared gold standard provided a strong foundation of stability and predictability. However, the outbreak of the First World War in 1914 placed immense strain on the system. The gold standard was suspended, and the fixed exchange rates between the three currencies were abandoned. Although the union officially dissolved, all three countries decided to keep the name krona for their respective national currencies, a legacy of this important era that continues even today. The 20th century brought, well, unprecedented challenges that directly impacted the physical form of Swedish money. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 forced Sweden, though neutral, to conserve valuable metals for industry and defense. The Scandinavian monetary union collapsed as the gold standard was abandoned. Silver and bronze, which had traditionally been used for coins, became scarce. In response, the Swedish government began to mint coins out of cheaper metals. From 1917 to 1919, many of the smaller denomination ore coins were struck in iron instead of bronze. This was a temporary measure born of necessity, and these dark, rust-prone war coins served as a constant reminder of the global conflict. This pattern repeated itself during World War II. Once again, Sweden remained neutral but faced severe shortages of strategic materials. From 1942 onwards, copper, nickel, and bronze were replaced by iron in the 1, 2, and 5 ore coins. Even the silver content in the larger denomination krona coins was drastically reduced. These changes really reflected the economic realities of a world at war. After the war, as the economy recovered, the coins gradually returned to their traditional materials, with bronze and cupronickel, a copper-nickel alloy, becoming standard. The design of the coins also evolved, reflecting a more modern, simplified aesthetic, while still retaining traditional symbols like the 3 crowns and the monarch's monogram. The late 20th and early 21st centuries have been defined by another, even more profound shift: the move away from physical cash towards digital payments. Sweden has become one of the most cashless societies in the world. The use of debit and credit cards, and more recently, mobile payment apps like Swish, has become the norm for almost all transactions. Many shops and restaurants no longer accept cash at all. This rapid digitalization has led to a dramatic decrease in the circulation of coins and banknotes. In response, Sweden undertook a major coin and banknote reform between 2015 and 2017, introducing a new, smaller and lighter series of coins and rendering all older versions invalid. Today, the future of physical currency in Sweden is a topic of intense debate. While the Riksbank continues to mint coins through its contracted partner, Mint of Finland, their role in the economy is definitely diminishing. The central bank is now actively exploring the possibility of introducing a digital version of its currency, the e-krona, which would be a state-guaranteed digital complement to physical cash. The long and fascinating journey of Swedish currency, from Viking hacksilver to heavy copper plates, from the first royal pennies to the modern krona, is entering a new, uncertain chapter. The form of money may change, but its fundamental role as a measure of value and a symbol of the nation